You're watching Cable 2.
Welcome to the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools series for a safe reopening. This series has started in August, and we're continuing to talk about a safe reopening for our children. I want to welcome our parents, our students, our employees to this opportunity to hear from our healthcare professionals. We have Dr. Pam Oliver with us today and Dr. David Priest. Both have been in the community sharing information about things we need to do to be safe during this COVID pandemic. And we appreciate their service to our community, the information they have provided for us. And we are so thankful that they again have agreed to join us today to share additional information as we work on a safe reopening and reentry to our schoolhouse. We have Dr. Pam Oliver. She has led at Novant Health and served in various leadership roles. She is currently serving as Executive Vice President of Novant Health and President of the Novant Health Physician Network. She has worked hard on many community initiatives, including serving as chair of the Forsyth Infant Mortality Reduction Coalition. She has a special interest in racial disparities and health outcomes. Dr. David Priest is an infectious disease and internal medicine doctor with Novant Health. He has over 20 years of experience in the field and has served as Senior Vice President and Chief Safety and Quality Officer for Novant Health. So thank you so much, Dr. Oliver and Dr. Priest, for joining us today. And thank you. We wanted to take our time. We know our time is limited, but we wanted to share with our audience today a little information about two very important aspects of our safe reopening. And one is masking, and the other is social distancing. And I can tell you, I looked on my counter this morning, and I had several masks. I had this, and I had another one that someone's given me. I have this pretty little white one with the black straps. I have this one here with the bows on the end. I have these. My daughter had, informed me that they did not meet the cool factor, Mom. But I wear these all the time, and then I have some I even bought from a local store. I have these here, and it just goes on and on and on. I right now have baskets of masks that I can select from. But again, I typically have my favorite, and so it's this one here that I dispose of on a regular basis. But I have many choices. So can you all tell us a little bit about masks and why masks are so important, and the types of masks we should look for if this is an important part of our keeping ourselves safe?
So thanks. This is David. That's a really great question. And so I think we think about masks, we think about at its core, COVID-19 is a respiratory illness, right? So at its most simple, basic level, when people are infected with it and they breathe, it ends up out in the air around them. And so we want to prevent that from happening. So it's really important that everybody wears a mask as much as possible. And that should be, we wear a mask in case we have it, so we don't want to spread the virus to other people. And we also wear a mask in case we don't have it and we don't want to get it. The good news is that there are a lot of different masks out there, and some studies have been done that show that the vast majority of those masks are effective. Now, there are a few that are not quite as effective that we need to think through and probably should be avoided. One is bandanas. So we see those out there sometimes, and it makes sense. People have a lot of bandanas at home often, but they typically don't block this virus as well as they could. Two is the masks that have a valve on them. So those might protect the wearer, but won't protect people that are around them. And then the last one that probably doesn't work as well is the gaiter style, which I know we see a lot of those around your neck, and you pull them up over your face. Those have been shown maybe not to be as effective, but the vast majority, and I think all the masks you held up, Dr. Hairston, I think all of those are good. And so
Are they good? Okay.
surgical style, the cotton mask, those that have 2 layers, those are all really good. So all the ones you have are great, and that's what people ought to think about when they're masking.
Well, Dr. Priest, we are often asked by teachers and students, may I take my mask off when I go to the playground? What are your thoughts on that?
I think in general, it's best to try to keep it on. And I know the risk is less when we're outside. So ventilation is so important in the prevention of spread of COVID. And you say, well, I'm outside and the wind's really blowing. I think if you're well beyond other people and the wind's really blowing, it's less necessary. But I think for the most part in these kind of educational situations, people are running by, they're in fairly close quarters, even if they're outside. So I think in an abundance of caution, it's best to try to wear your mask when you're around other people, even if it's outside.
So can you speak to the risk? If one person is wearing a mask and one is not, what are the risks? How does that impact the risk based on the number of people wearing their mask?
So it's always better for more people to wear their masks. So I get asked all the time, hey, I want to do this particular activity. Is that safe? Really? And it's really a combination of probabilities. We think about, what are people doing? Are they singing or yelling? Are they wearing masks? Are they in areas where there's good ventilation? How many people are in that area? How long are they going to be there? All of those things really wrap up into what risk is. And to minimize risk, it's better the more people that mask, particularly if you're going to be in closed quarters or near each other for longer periods of time, the better.
Okay. And this term of social distancing, we really became familiar with social distancing back in March when we all met at the health department, and we really that became such common terms for our students and our teachers. We've always spoke to that during flu season. Keep your distance. Be careful about sneezing and coughing. So, Dr. Oliver, what's so important about that distance? We've heard 6 feet, 10 feet. What's important?
So right now we utilize 6 feet as what we consider appropriate social distancing for keeping yourself safe for COVID. And really that's about creating a space around you. As David mentioned, if you are protecting yourself with a mask, others are protected with a mask, and you have distance, you're really optimizing the prevention of spreading COVID if someone happened to have it and was asymptomatic. So it's really around trying to minimize your potential exposure if you happen to have someone around you. And we know 6 feet is not, that is a estimation on, what we know, the data that we know. 10 feet, great, even better, right? So the more distance you can put there, but it's just not as feasible to do 10 or 12 feet as much as it is 6 feet. And so it's a very practical way of thinking through how to protect yourself.
Now, I've noticed that people become more relaxed. I have a sign on my door, if you knock to interrupt my task, please remember to wear your mask. So they remember, wear your mask. But I've noticed that people become more comfortable. But you all are accustomed to this. You all have been working with this pandemic, the COVID-19, since, March, or well before March. How do you reinforce the idea that masking and distancing is important at all times beyond 10 days of this? How do we get people to understand that this is something they need to do as a matter of routine and not just a periodic, a moment in time?
I think the first thing is accountability. Everyone taking responsibility for the entire community, right? So I wear my mask, not just to prevent myself if I'm concerned about being exposed, but I wear it to prevent myself from affecting others, right? So I wear it for the health of my entire clinic, for my team when I'm around them. So it's a matter of respect in a lot of ways, and accountability. And it does take building that culture. So I think in a school community, all parents want to own that we want our children to go to a safe space. So we want our children to be protected and we want other children to be protected. Yeah. So we're going to invest in teaching our children that it is necessary to wear a mask. that we know that children as young as 3 or 4 years old can wear masks and keep them on and do really well with it, with the right reinforcement and support and building that culture over time. So, in our clinical teams, I'll say that for us to be able to bring patients back for very necessary care in our medical clinics, when people were very scared and COVID has, been at a peak, we had to make sure that our patients and our teams felt safe. And so the continued messaging around this being about the entire community, keeping ourselves safe. And honestly, none of us want to be, ultimately the one that we feel accountable for multitude of people being exposed and infected. So to be able to really say that this is what's going to be able to keep the school community in person and sustain in-person education, that we all have to do it together.
Exactly, because when we open, we want to be open. We want to remain open as much as possible. We know that there will be challenges for us. We realize that, but I feel that we have some strategies in place to help us continue to be safe. We've talked a lot about cohorts of students remaining clustered together. How does that help with contact tracing? I don't know, either Dr. Priest or Dr. Oliver, how does that help with contact tracing? And what is contact tracing to our parents and students?
That's a great question. Contact tracing is when we realize that someone has an infection with COVID or they have a positive test, and then we have to trace back and understand from a public health standpoint who all they've been around. And that might be family members or other students or teachers. And so when students are divvied up into distinct groups, or sometimes in healthcare, distinct groups of patients or individuals, it's a lot easier to track who all might have been exposed to make sure they can be tested and they can be quarantined and protected. So it's really a method. It makes it easier to track exposures and positives so that we can keep people safe and ensure people stay home so you don't have a greater spread in the community. And that'll be really key. I think the more we all mask and socially distance, and when we have a positive case, react quickly and get those folks to stay home, to your point, we'll be able to stay open and do the things we need to do for much longer if we're all pulling in the same direction.
Exactly. And so when we talk to our children as parents and we're speaking to our children who, I just can't do this. I don't want to mask, Mom. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel. What type of advice should we give our parents?
Well, I would say, I'm the mother of 3 children, and I have worked through this with my own children as we are out and about. And so part of it is just positive reinforcement and role modeling. So I model for my children when we go that I wear the mask, and we talk about it, we socialize it so that it becomes a normal part of where we are. So education is really important. There are some who may not be able to or willing to, and I think that is why I value that the school system has set up an option for those who do not feel that masking is for them and they want to, instead do a virtual option so that they can then choose not to, but, and stay at home and keep others safe if they, would not be able to mask. But practicing it. We go out and about, and as I've said, our pediatricians have told us over and over again, and we've seen it when we visit the clinics, really young kids are able to do it with that right environment and that right support. And so it's just you owning it as a parent to make sure that your children are ready and able when they first come back to the school.
So Dr. Oliver, you all have been face-to-face with patients for some time, working with COVID patients. What advice would you give our teachers and our employees when they return face-to-face with our students?
So I'll say that, those early days when we started introducing more patients back into our clinics for non-emergent care, it was the first few days are a little overwhelming, and just expect that. Everyone's getting used to it. Everyone's a little sensitized to, any and everything we think could be infectious. I'll tell you, our clinics we were wrapping stuff in saran wrap. We were, everyone was wearing gloves initially, and it took a while for us to understand what we really needed and what we didn't need and how to keep ourselves safe. And so the masking consistently, the distancing multiple conversations with our patients, we took a pretty, strong stance that all of our teams had to mask while they're in our spaces the entire time, and that our patients had to mask unless there was a reason that they could not mask, so that we could keep everyone safe. Because we knew that the most important thing for our patients, for them to be willing to come back, was that they felt like they were safe. So I'll say that in the very beginning, it will be a little overwhelming. Reach out, support each other, you work your way through it. Teachers are the most creative people I know. So they will find ways to help their students to get there. And it's going to require lots of conversations with the students, right? With the parents even maybe. So a little bit work on the front end if you identify opportunities or areas where you're actually having difficulty with getting the entire classroom to stay masked, and do fun things. I mean, when I operate, I remember this whole, you get hot after a while, right? And you just feel like you need to pull that cool air on your face. And now masking, everyone gets that feeling. And so figuring out ways to let kids be able to, get a little bit of that air, put it back on, what's really high risk and what really isn't as much, so that you can balance that quality of life with keeping everyone safe.
Thank you. And Dr. Priest, we've heard many parents that they've called and they want to wear the face shields, the plastic face shields, versus the mask. Can you tell us about the face shields and how they help us be safe? Is that a good idea?
Yeah, so the idea around the face shield really comes from the idea that this virus can be spread through mucous membranes of any kind, including your eyes. But what the literature seems to show right now is that masks are more effective than face shields.
Okay.
So face shields can supplement using a mask. I think if there are activities that people think there's going to be potential exposure, have that eye protection is okay. But in our view, it doesn't take the place of a mask. Now, there are individuals who are unable to mask for medical reasons, et cetera. That may be the only protection they can get. But if you truly want to protect others and yourself, the mask is a better way to go than the face shield.
Thank you so much. And we've had many questions about face shields and plexiglass between desks, all of these kinds of things to protect ourselves. And we are looking at many of those safe reopening strategies. We also have had many parents call out transportation. And we realized that due to the reduced density of student population on buses, and the numbers of students that we can put on buses and place on buses safely, we have fewer buses to transport students. When we go from 45 students to 23 students, obviously that means a reduction in our transportation in our vehicles. And so we realized that might cause some of our parents an inconvenience. However, we really focused on safety. We commit to providing our students with transportation if they're in the residential area. Choice and magnet will be reviewed after we have planned for all of our students in the residential area. And so when children get on buses and those places that they congregate often, we will ask students to wear a mask to ride our buses, to be safe, not only protect themselves, protect others as well. And so when we look at our parents and all that they have done to support our children, we are so thankful. We will continue to offer virtual education to our students, and we will continue to, move forward with the in-person instruction as much as possible. Dr. Oliver, we'll start with Dr. Priest and then close with Dr. Oliver. Any words of wisdom to our parents?
Yeah, I would say, as Dr. Oliver said earlier, support each other. This is a lot of uncharted territory. We tell people a number of things. One is masking is the most important thing. Mask, mask, mask. Then be socially distant. Then get your information from trusted sources. There's so much on social media and so many things that come out there that cause anxiety and worry. Sometimes it's just better to take a break from social media to get away from those things and really look to the CDC and other reputable sources as to what the best information is. We also remind our team members about self-care. All of us have stress during this time. As parents, we have stress. If our kids have stress, take a break. Take the time to know yourself, go do something fun, get outside, get away from it all, take a rest, and support each other within your household and within your community, and that'll go a long way. And we'll get through this together.
Thank you. Very good, Dr. Oliver.
So I have a couple of things. I'll say that one, this is a time where there really is a community responsibility for the health and well-being of all of our children. We've always said, if you are sick, if you have a fever, stay home. And that's inconvenient sometimes, It's inconvenient for us when we're trying to staff clinics. It's going to be inconvenient when you have, people who have colds or potential flu-like illness, that it will be difficult to really distinguish what is potentially COVID and what is, could be the influenza or, the common cold. So we think that masking will help decrease some of the flu, but we don't know yet. So I would encourage everyone to, one, if your children are sick, please pay attention to those questions and do not send your kids to school where you feel that they could be infecting others in any way. And consider getting the flu shot for your children this year. We really, want as much of the community protected as possible to take flu out of the equation. We don't yet know what flu plus COVID would mean for anyone, child or adult. So getting your flu shot is very important this year. And then lastly, I'll say that we're always a little sensitive to these holidays or events where people kind of, like you said, we get a little relaxed and we ignore some of what we have thought about, and we tend to see increase in activity after those things. So I would say on a day-to-day basis, the sleepovers and things like that, we discourage them because we've seen that happen over and over again where someone was asymptomatic, they have a sleepover because everyone seems okay, and it ends up spreading. And then with Halloween, Thanksgiving holiday, and Christmas upon us, right in the midst of the school, resuming, that just as you think about your plans, make sure that you take all those things into consideration with social distancing, wearing masks, hand hygiene, avoiding large crowds, especially in confined spaces, for the protection of your family and also for the rest of the school community.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver. Dr. Pam Oliver is the Executive Vice President of Novant Health and President of the Novant Health Physician Network. And Dr. David Priest is an infectious disease and internal medicine doctor with Novant. And I can tell you, I just want to thank you all for being in the community. You all are accessible. You work as a team and to educate our community. You make yourselves available, and just know that as an educator, superintendent, a mom myself, I appreciate your willingness to share information about a safe reopening and how we just coexist safely throughout this pandemic. And we do have a video on masking that follows, but I want to remind everyone, and as my children have said, Mommy, that's just not a cool mask, but that's okay. It's a safe mask. So I'm going to remember to wear my mask, as I always do. And again, I want to thank you all so much for being with us today. Do have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we're back at school, remember to wear your mask. Have it ready to put on as you approach school. And be sure to put it over your mouth and nose as you meet the greeter who will take your temperature. Keep your mask on as you enter school. You're doing your part to protect your fellow students and teachers. And when you and a friend are both wearing a mask, you are protecting each other. Keep the 3 W's in mind when you're at school. Wear a face covering. Wait 6 feet apart to avoid close contact. Wash your hands and use sanitizer. We're so happy you are coming back to school, and we want to keep you as safe as possible. Wear your mask and protect your friends.